Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Deep Roots Movement. Today, we're in lovely ancient Antalya on the Mediterranean coast of Turkey, here in Anatolia. In the last episode, we discussed the 40 days of Dajjal and his deluge, where we discussed a deluge of deceit and devil tech enveloping the world, and we also discussed his creation of a hell realm through the use of electromagnetic frequencies and radiation as a means of not only depopulating the world of organic, Adamic humans, but also of enslaving the rest that are transformed into transhumans through genetic modifications, through various technologies, and pervading the earth with radiation, which is an invisible fire. So we've got a hell realm being created in which he will maintain total control in his idealization. So let's discuss a little bit more about him and his 40 days. I was reading a tradition, there are a number of them, where it was discussing the 40 nights that he would be establishing his rule on the earth. So we've got 40 days and 40 nights of the deceiver, which is interesting because that contrasts with the 40 days and 40 nights of Nuh alayhi salam and the flood he experienced. Now that was purifying the world of not just sinful humans, but according to the very ancient traditions, we potentially have hybrids, human hybrids being purified from the earth, and black magicians and sorcerers. Now we're seeing a rise of black magic and sorcery, especially utilizing technology in order to establish control grids worldwide. So when we've got this 40 days and 40 nights, he's engaging in a deluge, he's flooding the world with this devil tech and deception. And many people are falling for it. He's the one-eyed. We see one-eye symbolism all over the place. When we see the physical descriptions of him, he's depicted as a short man. In at least one account that I read, he's hunchback, which suggests that he is not an upright man. He's not upright. In another tradition, he's depicted as pigeon-toed. And so basically, his feet are pointing inward or outward. I've read different, I believe it's inward. But either way, it suggests that he cannot walk properly. He does not walk the straight path. All right, so we've got symbolic readings of him. He's depicted as having curly hair, wiry hair in some accounts. Obviously, we know about the eyes. So he's blind in one eye, and in the other, it is malformed. So he's a deformed being. Something is off about the way he is depicted. We could think about him as an individual, as most of us have. I was raised with seeing the Antichrist as an individual, even though in the Christian and biblical traditions we hear of many Antichrists, just the same way where we have many Dajjals, many deceivers who will come in the end times during the eschaton. Now it's very possible, when it comes to reading biblical and Quranic text, to see individuals, every time you read about an individual, you're also reading about a community and a collective potentially. We should not limit our ability to read, to have multiple readings of an ayat, of a word, of a phrase within the Quran. We need to stay open, and we need to collect as much data as possible, and we need to sort that data to see the patterns and synthesize it properly. And we should also utilize the Quran to read the Quran, utilizing the vocabulary, the grammar, utilizing the trilaterals within it, the social and historical context, the context clues within the Quran, and then read outside of it, looking at the broader social historical context from when the Quran was coming down and then the times it's talking about. We also can look at the Hadith, and like I was saying before, we need a tazkiyah of the traditions, and it does not mean that we get rid of most of the hadith. Matter of fact, once we go through the purification process, we will see that a number of really important hadith remain that are sahih, still considered sahih, and have the strong chains of narration. We may actually learn some further lessons about the chains as we go through this process, inshallah. We also, as we do a strong comparative religion study that is much more just than we have done in the past, searching for the prophets across the world, the 124,000, then there's a very good chance that we can actually recover many themes and many concepts that will shed light on parts of the Quran that we had not noticed before and help us to derive much deeper insight and read it in a more practical manner, a way that we can apply and derive great benefit from, inshallah, as individuals and as an ummah. So anyway, when it comes to Dajjal, we need to look at him, symbolically, literally, take various views. The way I see it is that when it comes to viewing him physically, we've got the whole hunchback and the pigeon toe idea. Leads us to better understanding of not walking the straight path, not being an upright man. So it comes to the whole idea of him as a collective. So what kind of a collective are we talking about? We are talking about a deformed, malformed humanity, a collective of people that are somehow not normal. They have been transmutated. They have been transformed, perhaps transhuman. So we see the transhuman agenda. Now you say, well, it sounds like we have an individual though. Now check this out. It may be that there is an individual because perhaps the Dajjal, he's said to be soulless in some accounts. So he does not have a soul, perhaps. Well, neither does artificial intelligence, does it not? So AI is artificial. And it's an artificial logos. An artificial ruh with the digital. The digital is an artificial ruh. And then AI potentially can come and through technological backdoors that are implanted within the human body, within the bloodstream, within the flesh, so embedded chips or nanotechnology that is able to be Bluetooth in or utilizing 5G to connect people to quantum computers, etc. We have the potentiality, things like graphene oxide, etc. We have the potential for AI to be able to possess individuals in large groups of people, to mind control them, and to have them do their bidding. Now, people have been talking a lot about zombies lately. Now, what's interesting is we tend to think of zombies like in the way that they're depicted in The Walking Dead. They're flesh-eating zombies, brains. They're looking to absorb living flesh into their system. But when you look into the origin of the zombie stories, if I'm remembering correctly, it comes from Haiti, in the Caribbean, and it's related to voodoo, which comes out of Central and West Africa. And these are traditions that combine a number of ancient traditions from Central and West Africa, hidden within Roman Catholicism. And you have possession cults within them. Also, you have a lot of herbalism and magical practice. Herbalism in and of itself is not evil at all. It's actually quite beneficial. But there are various plant medicines and minerals and substances derived from creatures such as certain types of fish that can paralyze humans and put them into a state where their pulse disappears, where the breath is so subtle that it cannot be detected, and a person might appear dead for a period of time, sometimes for a number of days. And according to the stories that I'd read quite a long time ago, they would be able, you would have an individual that was targeted for whatever reason. And then the witch doctor, the sorcerer, or the witch, they would give them this substance. They would poison this person. Then the person it would appear as if they died. Then they would be put into a coffin, buried. And then a few hours later, a few days later, the witch doctor, the witch, the sorcerer, their cult members would come and dig the body up. And then they would give them a certain type of substance that would then bring them back into semi-awakened consciousness. However, they are now in a state where they can be easily controlled and manipulated, and they can do manual labor. And so zombies would, from my understanding, would be utilized as a slave labor force, working for the sorcerer or the witch or the cult. And they could engage in this practice for quite a long time, and they would have a normal lifespan. There may be instances that the scholars can find whereby zombies were able to come out of a zombified state, but it may be that the zombies remained in a zombified state, that they were damaged goods, that the drugs did damage to their cognitive abilities. However, they could understand orders and accomplish certain tasks, like they could do farming work, they could dig things, they could, anyway, there were a number of things they could do. So it could be that the Dajjal is related to a collective that then is a slave force possessed by AI. It could be, and this is quite interesting to me, that Dajjal, and this actually makes more sense to me, that the deceiver is able to kind of somehow interface with AI and interface with the devil tech infused humans, now the transhumans, who are no longer, they no longer have their pure Adamic flesh. They are no longer organic human beings in this state. This does not mean that they are permanently in that state. Now, biblically, people who take the mark of the beast, they are condemned to hellfire. Hellfire is suffering. Now, in the next video, inshallah, we're going to discuss what suffering and hellfire can mean and how to think about some other ways we might think about this. But there may be ways that we can bring people out of these miseries. And until something happened where it was like full-on zombie apocalypse and they were clearly not human completely, then only at that point would, we don't give up. We want to bring our brothers and sisters back if we can. And we would need to bring our best minds together towards this end. All right, so let's get back to the whole thing about the deceiver and the potential that he is a very, very brilliant man. A very ancient man, in fact. Maybe more than a man, in fact. Perhaps this man is able to interface with AI and with this devil tech infused humanity that's a collective, a hive mind of sorts, and himself take possession of individuals and the collective. Now, you're asking, how would a man possess another man? There are ancient yogic techniques from many of the yogic traditions. Now, yoga, many people misunderstand what yoga is. Yoga, my understanding is it relates to unifying and harmonizing and making whole the body and the mind. And so there are, usually when we think of yoga, we think of hatha yoga, and we think of breathing techniques and stretching of the body in a mindful manner. We might think of mantrayana, so reciting of certain bija seed symbols, bija seed syllables, so to speak. So these would be very similar to adhkar, to reciting names of Allah, where it's like, reciting la ilaha illallah, or reciting kun, so kun would be a seed syllable. And so these kind of practices, or, different breath techniques and body positions, these would, for instance, we've got, in the yogic traditions, they also do what are called mudras, which are hand symbols. And we know that, the evil ones use hands, they position their hands in various hand signs that are similar to sign language. Hand positionings in and of themselves are not evil. They can be utilized for evil, just like if your little son draws the sunshine on a picture. Does that mean they're part of the Illuminati? No, by no means. And if we see sun symbolism, we have to look at the context. It is not just that every single instance, or if somebody with hand symbols, if somebody accidentally, inadvertently puts their hands into a certain positioning, does not mean that they are part of a secret brotherhood. Some things will naturally happen and by accident. And so we need to be aware, and we need to read things within their context, and also look at a continuous pattern. If an individual uses hand symbolism all the time, that could be something. Those are called mudras. And mudras also, it's like, so stretching the hands in certain positions. We have them, so for instance, when we say shahada, like so, during prayer, in the various schools, there are different versions of this. So pointing with your finger, that's considered a mudra. You know, if you would move it in certain directions, up and down in circles, you're doing some kind of a mudra. So mudras in and of themselves are not evil or wrong. Just like when we are praying, we're making salah, we're doing a form of hatha yoga. You know, we are bending our bodies in various positionings. So hatha yoga is not evil in and of itself. It can be used in evil ways. Now, to get back to the point, when it comes to the yogas, when it comes to the yogic tradition, things can be used for healthy purposes and for unhealthy purposes. Things can be used for benefit and for harm, for good and for evil, so to speak. So one of the techniques I read about that has been written about in some of the literature in the upper levels of, say, the Tibetan tantric tradition, within the Shaivite tantric tradition, and a number of the other yogic traditions. And we'll discuss these in some other videos, inshallah. But when it comes to the yogas, many aspects you could consider Islam to be a yoga. You know, to unify and harmonize body and mind through salah, through som, through shahada, through sadaqah, through ethics, calm and concentration. We are brought toward our perfection, toward our maturity, and then a beautification. And so the yoga also means, to yoke. It's cognate with the word yoke. When I was growing up, the word yoke is, there was a Bible verse my grandmother would always say to me, to be equally yoked. She wanted me to marry a woman that I was equally yoked with. And so we automatically think of two oxen who have a yoke over them, the wood that brings them together. So you got the two head of cattle, the two oxen, and they're going to do farm work. So the wood will link them between their necks and make sure that they have balance between them so they can pull the load evenly. So a married couple, what my grandmother was suggesting is that we have similar beliefs, similar practices, and a similar goal in life. And that we fit together comfortably in an excellent manner in all aspects. So the word yoke is related to the word yoga. And yogi is someone who practices a yoga. So someone who's like a wali would be considered a high-level yogi. So we use comparative religion terms in certain instances in order to get as close to an understanding as possible. That's why I like to think in word clusters, in order to look at associations and context, in order to get close to understanding a concept and an idea, in order to make the best possible synthesis that is practical and applicable, not only for myself, but of benefit to others through sharing. All right, so when it comes to this yoga, this tradition that I was suggesting, it would enable a high-level yogi to go into a very, very deep level of meditation. And at the point that a man or woman or child is dying, they could send their consciousness into the body, and as the soul or spirit leaves that body, they're able to take possession of that body and then use their yogic skills to manipulate that body as they choose. Perhaps they've got healing abilities and they can heal the body so that they can utilize that body for some purpose. This is a highly condemned practice within the yogic traditions that, from what I've seen within various Hinduisms and Buddhisms, etc. It's not an encouraged practice. It's considered, it has many, it's a dark side to it. And it's to be condemned. And potentially, we need to protect ourselves against such things. So when it comes to the deceiver, how might he... So first, if he was living in ancient times, he's the one-eyed. Perhaps he was either Osiris or Horus, Thor or Odin. But as Osiris or Horus, perhaps, or maybe he was a priest of these deities, and then they would take possession of his body, and he was able to gain. Because anytime a deity and one of these spirits, these shayateen, when they enter into flesh, they not only take something, but they always leave something behind. Some kind of energy, a resonance. So perhaps this priest, he was ridden like a horse. So this deity the shayateen would come down upon him and possess him, and then use his body as a vehicle, and then leave, but leave him certain energy, certain imprints, certain benefits, and then this priest would engage in blood sacrifice to please his Lord. Or perhaps Horus or Osiris were those priests in the first place who knew how to possess bodies, and perhaps they would possess people at the point of death. Perhaps they would possess children and then grow up in that body, and they would have their cult members take care of that individual, kind of like Damien style in The Omen. So we've got this, we've got to consider these possibilities. So this brings me to the next point. Allahu Alam, these are all big topics, but we need to consider as much data as possible right now. I'm not saying that he is any of these people. Also, Osiris and Horus are also associated with Nimrod. Nimrod, so Nimrod. So that's an interesting concept. We've got the whole Nephilim context, the fallen angels, the fallen shayateen, the fallen jinn. Many different possibilities and options to consider. And we should consider all these possibilities and not be afraid to consider the potentialities, because we need to protect ourselves as best we can. All right, so now this brings us into the point of his imprisonment. So we know one of the companions of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was on a sailing mission. They were lost at sea for a month. They land on an island. And I'm not aware that he mentions where this island was. He mentions a monastery. And they had to go through a process to enter this monastery. That's where he sees the deceiver bound in a very, very, like he's bound with his hands to his neck. His feet are bound with chains. And he's secured in place. And he's jumping between earth and heaven and back and forth. He's able to jump back and forth. So it could be that over many millennia, you've got the same consciousness who's going body to body, accumulating information, data, skill sets, learning where things are, working with the shayateen, perhaps working with Yuj and Majuj. If there is a Nimrod connection, if this is the same person as Nimrod, who also has, in one of the stories, Nimrod even has this dream where he loses an eye and becomes one-eyed. So Nimrod connects to Horus and Osiris, and also Nimrod is connected to the descent line of Cain. He's connected to, and potentially to Yuj and Majuj. So we got all these connecting points. Now, and also we've got, with Nimrod, we've got the story of him being taken by birds in this casket-like box up into the heavens, where he's shooting arrows that go up in the sky, and he's trying to kill Allah. And the arrows return covered in blood, similar to the Yuj and Majuj story, where they're shooting arrows trying to kill the people of the heavens. And those arrows return with blood on their tips. Now remember, a syringe also is a type of javelin. It jabs in. Javelin, jab. Javelin. And so we've got this, and it has literal linguistic connections here. Look up the etymologies, it's very interesting. So we're seeing these connections between Nimrod, Yuj and Majuj, Cain, and the deceiver. The false Messiah, so to speak. So now we've got the deceiver. He is potentially utilizing these yogic techniques and magical practices. Perhaps he had gone to this monastery. Now, I look at it like it could be a Christian monastery. I know that many people believe that it is Great Britain, that he's somewhere in England, Scotland, that he's been imprisoned. Some believe he's still imprisoned there. I see the evidence that either he's already free or he's about to be free. I could see where Scotland or England makes a lot of sense. But also it could be that he might have been in prison more than once. By the Malaika, he could have by the angels, by Walis. It could be that it could have been in a Buddhist monastery. Now the time period when the Arabs were, they were engaged in shipping, they were doing trade missions down, through Yemen, into the Persian or Arabian Gulf, however you prefer politically. They went to India, they went to Sri Lanka. They were also going out toward Indonesia by Sumatra and Java. Now in Sumatra, these were strong, how can I put it? Like strongholds of tantric Buddhism at one point. For instance, the great tantric master Atisha from Bengal, from Bangladesh or West Bengal, in that region, the Bengal region, he studied in Sumatra for quite a long time. So there were really strong monasteries there. If you've ever gone into a tantric Buddhist monastery, they have a lot of similarities to Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic monasteries. You know, statuary, images, candles, incense, ritual objects. So it could be that there were walis among them. That's another issue. You might automatically recoil and be like, how could a wali be Buddhist or Hindu or something else? People, there were 124,000 people that went around the planet as warners, as prophets. There are walis from all different backgrounds. This world is so much more than we've imagined. Our deen is so much more than we've imagined. So imagine that it may have been a Buddhist tantric monastery, and walis or high-level monks may have known that he was misusing these ancient spiritual technologies and doing dark black magic, and they may have imprisoned him. He may have been in prison more than once at different points. We've got to consider the possibilities. So anyway, this is part 2 of Dajjal, of the 40 days of Dajjal and his deluge, and connecting it to the days of Noah. We're pulling all these pieces together. Cain, Yuj, Majuj, Nimrod, Devil Tech, the Deceiver, the Antichrist. And inshallah, the puzzle is starting to come together, and we're dot connecting properly, and Allah will guide us, inshallah. So let's continue to work on collaborating towards seeing clearly and best preparing for these times. Remember, it is absolutely critical that we make hijrah of the heart, that we make tawbah and tazkiyah, that we look out after our brothers and sisters. Do not take the mark. Do not take the mark. Do not take the mark. I'm just saying this. This is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. And go and look up what critical means. We should know our vocabulary. We should know our grammar. Anyway, it's a beautiful thing. And I'm going to apply that same thing. I need to be learning my Arabic, inshallah. But you are much loved. You are well appreciated. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is your brother Ilyasin, and we are the Deep Roots Movement.